seasoned speaker and a seasoned evaluator. This year, if anybody doesn't know, Gordon is the area director. And what does that mean? With all the years of Gordon speaking and presenting and roles as a leader, he is well on his way to becoming a distinguished Toastmaster. So I get the feeling maybe this year it's going to happen, or maybe not. Okay, maybe it's next year then. So that would be great. We're going to have another DTM in our group, so we're all rooting for you, Gordon. He obviously is a very dedicated member of our club. He's always there to help any other member if they have questions with their speeches. So he is always ready. Yeah, he's always ready to share his knowledge. So let's welcome to Gordon up here. So Gordon Yee with Better Her Than Me, which makes me really, really curious. Better Her Than Me, Gordon Yee.
My wife, Marisa, has some fantastic stories. Now, some of you may already know, but for those who don't, Marisa is an animal health technician, and she works at the Montreal Biodome. But I'm not going to tell you any of the stories that take place at the Biodome. I want to tell you one of the first stories that she told me about way back in 1987 when we first met. I was working at McGill University, and she was there doing a stage, an internship, for her animal health program at Benyon College. This was her last stage, and she told me how the one previous, she and a classmate were the first two students from Vanier ever to go to St. Kitts as part of their internship. And she had some great stories about St. Kitts. Now, am I going to tell you about what they thought was a crack that ran down the kitchen ceiling, around the doorway, baseboards, and under the cupboard that no one could ever seem to open? Am I going to tell you about that and how it ended up being actually a line of tiny little ants? No, I'm not going to tell you that. Am I going to tell you the rather charming story about the two geckos, Herm and Sherm, that shared the basement bedroom that Marisa was sharing with her classmate? No. Am I going to tell you the rather horrifying story of the wolf spider the size of my fist that someone caught in a peanut butter jar, an empty peanut butter jar, and left on the kitchen table? No. I'm going to tell you about the skull. You see, while Marisa and her classmate were down in St. Kitts, they were actually there as support staff for Earthwatch. And they were working with the volunteers doing all these nature types of studies. Now, the difference between the support staff and the volunteers is the support staff have to pay their own way to get down there, and they completely volunteer everything, and they have a lot of work to do. The volunteers pay a lot more money, and they don't have as much work to do. So she's down there as support staff. And one of the things that they had to do was they had to participate in this monkey study. They knew of the troops of monkeys scattered across the island, and they wanted to get a population, a census for them, figure out how many monkeys were in the troops, what their genders were and everything, and so they had to go out and count them. Unfortunately, it wasn't so easy as just going there with a pen and paper and counting 1, 2, 3, 4, nothing like that. What you would actually have to do is break up into two teams. One team, which of course would be the support staff, they were the ones who had to get down into the brush, go along, herd the monkeys into a clearing, and then startle them. So the monkeys would then run, and as they would run, then you could see them clearly, you can count the monkeys, you can find out their sex, and this is how they would do the counts. Sounds fairly easy, right? This is in St. Kitts, West Indies. Hot. You would think that if you're going to be doing something physical like that maybe you don't want to be wearing all that much, right? You want to try to strip down, dress light. No, they couldn't do that. You see, first of all, there were acacia bushes all over the place that grow thorns 3 inches long. And then there were also the mangrove trees where the sap is toxic. And if you happen to get any of it in your eyes, it can actually blind you. So they weren't doing any of this stuff. They had on long sleeve shirts, they had on bandanas, they had on hats, they had jeans tucked into their hiking boots, and they had to go out there into the bush. And they had to crawl along and gently herd the monkeys over into the clearings. And as they're crawling around, there would be these holes in the ground. And they didn't know what the holes were at first, but they were told those were land crabs. Just try to avoid them as well. So they're crawling around, watching out for the needles and the sap and the land crabs as they're trying to keep an eye on the monkeys, herding them all into the clearing. And then when they get there into the clearing, they go, whoop! And they jump up and they scare all the monkeys, and the monkeys would go tearing off across the field. And the volunteers would count them. Well, the agreement was, though, that the support staff would do this the first day and the volunteers would do it the next. So the support staff was going out doing this stuff all day long. One of the people found a real find. As she was crawling through the brush, she found a perfectly intact macaque skull, a monkey skull. It was beautiful. For anyone who's an animal person, especially in the sciences, this is a find. She picked it up very carefully, wrapped it up, and put it into her bag. Later on that night, all the girls, all the women, they're sitting in one of the tents, and they're talking about the day, and this woman mentions the skull. And Marisa says, can I see it? So Jane takes out the skull, hands it over to Marisa. Marisa opens up the wrapping, takes out the skull, and looks at this beautiful treasure. She rolls it around her hands, and she turns it over, and what's that inside the cranium? Is that a stick? She reaches in and pulls out the tail of a scorpion. She took the skull and threw it across the tent. Ah! Jane, who had found the skull, was like, what are you doing? I'm going to ruin it. Marisa's just... They ran out to get their supervisor, Rob. And Rob had no idea, but apparently those holes were scorpion holes. No one had any idea that there were scorpions in that part of the island, but they found out the hard way that there were. And the best part of all of this, remember how it was supposed to be the volunteers the next day who would go out into the bush and flush out the monkeys? Not anymore. It went back to these guys, the support staff. And I got to tell you, when Marisa told me that story, the first time that we met, over 30 years ago, the first thing that came to mind was, better her than me. Adam Jones.